Hello, sixth graders. Welcome to our next math lesson. Today we're going to take a look at lesson 112. The title is dealing with multiplying and dividing integers. And this lesson is going to start on page 587. Now, just as a review, when we look at the word integer, remember an integer would be all whole numbers and also their opposite. So an integer would be a 3 or a negative 3. Or like a 7 and a negative 7. So any whole number that also has an opposite number to it, that's what an integer is. Now, we know that anytime you go to multiply two numbers that happen to be positive numbers, we know that the product, the answer to that problem, is going to be a positive number. So take, for example, here, I have a positive 3, and I'm going to multiply that by positive 4. And just as a review, sixth graders, whenever you see a number inside a parenthesis and then another number inside a parenthesis and there's no symbol in between them, this means multiplication. So what I'm doing here is I'm taking positive 3 and I'm multiplying that by positive 4. And notice that my answer is a positive 12. So we can correctly say that anytime you take a positive number and you multiply it by any positive number, the answer, the product, is going to give you a positive number. And you can do that with any of them. 5 times 5 equals 25. 6 times 7 equals 42. That works for every single one of them. Positive numbers times another positive number is going to give you a positive answer. But in today's lesson, we're going to be multiplying positives and negatives. And when do we know if the answer is a positive or a negative? So when we multiply a positive number and also a negative number, the product is actually going to be a negative number. Let me show you an example of what I'm talking about. I'm going to take the same three numbers that the same two numbers that I multiplied on the previous page. 3 times 4, but except this time, I'm going to say 3 times negative 4. And anytime you see this where it says 3 times negative 4, it's almost like I'm taking negative 4 and I'm adding it 3 times, because that's what this number out front means. This is how many times you would add that number together. So it's like I'm taking 3 negative 4s. So if I do a negative 4 and I add on another negative 4, that gives me a negative 8. And if I add on another negative 4, then my answer is going to be a negative 12. So in today's lesson, you're going to see that if the first number is a positive number and the second number in my multiplication problem is a negative number, that means the answer is going to be a negative number. The multiplication is still the same. 3 times 4 is still 12. But in this case, you're going to have 3 times negative 4. That answer is going to give you a negative 12. The same is true if you were to switch the numbers around. So let's say the negative number is the first number in my multiplication problem. So this is like taking negative 3 times 4. What this is really saying is I'm going to take negative 3, which is right here, and I'm going to write it down 4 times. Negative 3, negative 3, negative 3, negative 3. And it's like I'm adding all of them together, because negative 3 plus a negative 3 is negative 6. Plus another negative 3 is a negative 9. And then add on another negative 3. That gives me a negative 12. So by definition, if the first number is negative and the second number is positive, that means the answer itself is going to be negative. So just to review this page, anytime one of these numbers is negative and only one, the answer is going to give you a negative number. But what happens when they're both negatives? Well, when we multiply two negative numbers, believe it or not, the product is actually going to be a positive number. Consider this sequence of equations. Let's say I take this multiplication problem right here. 3 times 4 is 12. So I'm going to write that out. 3 times 4 is 12. Well, I know that when you take a positive number and multiply that by another positive number, I'm going to get a positive answer. Okay. What about if I write this out? 3 times the opposite of 4 is the opposite of 12. Well, what is the opposite of 4? The opposite of 4 is negative 4. What's the opposite of 12? Negative 12. So if I take 3 times the opposite of 4, that's going to give me the opposite of 12, which is negative 12. Okay, now I'm going to make sure there's negatives on all three of them. So I have the opposite of 3 times the opposite of 4. So I have the opposite 3 times the opposite of 4, it's actually going to give me a positive number. So in this case, anytime you have a negative number and you're going to multiply it by another negative number, the answer is going to give you a positive number. Think about in English class a while back, we talked about how a negative when you have two negatives in a sentence, the two negatives kind of cancel each other out. Mathematics is kind of the same way. When you have one negative and you multiply it by another negative, it's like those negative symbols cancel each other out. And now I'm left with a positive number as my answer. So let's take a look at some fact families for a moment. We're going to recall that when we arrange the numbers in the multiplication fact, you can make two division facts as well. So I have a multiplication. I have positive 3 times positive 4 is going to give me a positive 12. If I use these exact three numbers and I change them into a fact family, I take positive 12 divided by a positive 3 is going to give me a positive 4. Or if I switch that around, if I take my positive 12 and I divide that by my positive 4, the answer is going to be a positive 3. If I take the positive 3 and the negative 4, if I multiply 3 times negative 4, I know that answer is negative 12 because one of them is negative. If I use those in my fact family, if I have a negative 12 and I divide that by a positive 3, my answer should be negative 4. Or if I take a negative 12, which is right here, and I'm going to divide by the other number, which is a negative 3, that would give me a positive 4. Okay? So notice here, this one's a little different. I have negative 3 and a negative 4, making the answer positive. A negative 3 times a negative 4 gives me a positive 12. Okay? Now, when we study these 9 facts, we can summarize the results with these two rules. If the two numbers in a multiplication or two numbers in a division problem have the same sign, which means they're both plus, okay, or in here, they're both negatives, the answer is going to be positive. So I had positive, positive equals positive. Negative times negative is a positive. So if both of the numbers have the same sign, the answer is going to be positive. If the two numbers that are in my multiplication or my division problem have different signs, like for example, positive 3 and negative 4, or take negative 12 divided by a positive 3, that means then the answer, this will be a different sign by the way, the answer is going to be negative. This chart right here is going to help you understand to figure out if your number for today is going to be a positive number or if it's going to be a negative number. Let's use this to help multiply mentally. What I did is I kind of wrote the exact same thing here. I just shrunk it down a little bit. Remember, if the two numbers in multiplication are the same sign, the answer is positive. If the two numbers are different signs, the answer is negative. So let's take a look. All these are multiplication problems. So I have 8 multiplication problems here. And it looks like they're all the same problem, but some of them are positive, some of them are negative, some are multiplication, some are division. So let's take a look at this first one here. I have a positive 8. I'm going to multiply that by a positive 4. It looks to me as if both symbols are the same. And if both symbols are the same, that tells me my answer should be positive. So when I take 8 times 4, that's going to give me a positive 32. This next one here, I have a positive 8 and a negative 4. Now this time it looks like one's positive and one is negative. So it says if the two numbers have different signs, which this one does, one's positive, one's negative, then the answer's got to be a negative answer. So again, when I multiply 8 times 4, I know that that's 32. But since one is positive and one is negative, that's going to tell me that this answer right here is a negative 32. Next one, I have a negative 8 and a positive 4. Well, again, both numbers have different signs. That means then my answer needs to be a negative number. And I already know that 8 times 4 is 32, so I'm going to write this as a negative 32. And my last one, I have a negative 8, and I'm going to multiply by negative 4. This time, both of my numbers have the same sign on it. Both are negatives. So if they both have the same sign, then the answer is going to be a positive number. So this right here is going to be a positive 32. So notice, when they're both the same signs, answer was positive. Same sign, positive. When they were both when they were different signs, one's positive, one negative, the answer was negative. One of them's negative, one is positive, the answer is negative. The same rule applies for division. Again, I have positive 8, and I'm going to divide that by a positive 4. Well, I know that 8 divided by 4 is 2. Both signs are the same. That means my answer's got to be positive. So that answer is going to be a positive 2. This time I have 8 divided by a negative 4. Both of my signs are different. One's positive, one is negative. So if one's positive and one is negative, that means my answer has to be negative. So this would be a negative 2. Same here. I have a negative 8 and a positive 4. So if I divide these, I know that 8 divided by 4 is still 2. Both of these signs are different from each other. That means the answer must be negative. So this must be a negative 2. And this last one, I have a negative 8, and I'm dividing that by a negative 4. Well, in this case, I have a problem that where both of them are the same sign, which means my answer needs to be positive. And I know that 8 divided by 4 is 2, so this is going to give me a positive 2. So this chart right here is very helpful for today. If both the numbers have the same sign, the answer is positive. If both my multiplication or division problems have different signs, the answer is going to be negative. All right, 6th graders, I hope that helped you to understand how to multiply and divide integers with each other. Your assignment is going to be on pages 589 and 590, and we're looking at doing letters A through 22 for tomorrow. If you have any questions, please don't hesitate to reach out to me. I'm here to help you the best that I can. Don't be afraid to go back and look at the video, especially that chart there that told you when the answers should be positive and when the answers should be negative. So good luck with your lesson today, 6th graders. I hope everyone does really well. Reach out to me if you have questions. If not, I'll see you at the next video.